I'm Samantha Jones, host of the Meet Me for Coffee podcast. I'm coming to you guys from the Journal of Commerce Inland Distribution Conference here in Chicago. If you guys were unable to attend this year, I'm excited to be bringing coverage of the show through some of our speakers on this podcast, many of who are actually speakers at this conference, and then others who are attending and sharing their insights as well. We'll have multiple episodes releasing throughout the week, and we hope that this information is helpful and insightful for you and helps you decide if the JOC Inland Conference is one that you should put on your calendars for 2025. Hi everyone, I'm here with Laura. Laura, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Laura Eory. I'm the Director of Kind's Transportation at Kind Snacks. I also manage replenishment and in the interim, operations manufacturing.
Okay, so you have a very full plate right now, is what I just heard.
I do have a bit of a full plate, yes.
And you were here speaking on a session, a panel, I believe. What was that session topic about?
Yeah, the session was on workforce development. It was a very unique session. We had 3 women on the panel.
I love that.
I do too. I think that was a first for me, actually.
Yeah. Probably a first for a lot of conferences in general, yes.
Yes. So it took on a different flavor than I think we had expected the title to mean, but we talked a lot about how to be the right leader.
Sure.
And how to, if you're an aspiring leader, how do you start to prepare yourself for that? And the difference between a manager and a leader, and how to really look out for building your team, how to motivate your team, and really what people are looking for in a leader for themselves to report to and do well.
Awesome. What were some of your favorite takeaways from that conversation?
So some of the 2 other panelists that were on, Inga and Jess, they had some really good points around. We got asked questions like, would you want a team of all women? And I thought that was, that's such a hard question, because to me, it's not about all women, although that was a cool experience being on a panel. Having a team of all women isn't a goal for me necessarily. My goal is to have a very diverse team, diverse experiences, opinions, not just the walk of life or how they define themselves, but that also matters as well. You look at the world differently. So we spent some time talking about when you look at your workforce, you look at your team, who do you have on your team? How do you really try to do that right mix? So there's a bunch of different things, right? In transportation operations, you need a certain type of personality.
Yeah.
I don't think the chill, laid back person does very well enough. You have to be a little bit high-strung, borderline ADHD, right? But you can't have a team of people like that.
Right.
So you have to learn in that spec or those characteristics that you're looking for of someone on your team. Who's the one that gets really into the data? Who's the one that looks for trends? Who's the one that can go and take a crisis and just figure it out?
Yeah.
I said in the session, I couldn't think at the time, but I was like, I need a figure it outer. I need someone who just wants to go and take a problem. There's 10 different ways to get to a solution, and just really go after it and get where we need to be. So it could be a crisis, it could be a long-term service issue with a customer. Those are the people that I look for on my team, but I have to balance out myself as a leader. Sure. I'm a little bit more high-strung. I'm a little bit more likely to say oh my gosh, is the sky falling? I need people on my team who are a little bit more okay, let's take a step back. Let's look at the information, because that balances me out as a leader.
Yeah.
So there's kind of those different aspects that you're trying to balance.
I heard from several shippers, this was just off-the-record conversations one-on-one with them, that especially in the food and beverage space, so I'm sure you're going to relate to this, that the pandemic was mentally and emotionally exhausting.
Yeah.
That I heard from managers and leaders and employees that they were once we had a second to breathe, we realized the weight that we were carrying for 2.5 years straight.
Yeah.
And I think that what they all said to me was leadership in those years either made it work or they broke it. And it was either you had to feel like you had a true leader, and you had to feel like you were a part of a strong team, to be able to like work through that together.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we also saw, because of those circumstances, the high churn, the turnover. And so I'm like, hope and pray we are not looking at another like situation as dramatic as the pandemic.
Yeah.
But we're always going to be facing different challenges in supply chain, and they'll have different degrees of severity. But to me, it was just such a good like reinforcing moment of how much like leadership will define the culture and the success of teams, and their willingness to want to stay and be a part of it and contribute.
So I was talking to a carrier actually for a breakfast session here at Inland, which was really nice the way they structured that.
Yeah.
And he actually does like HBDI profiles, and you can find out your personality in times of stress and your personality when you're not stressed. That also is huge for leaders.
Yeah.
So if you can't think of a more stressful time than COVID, you had COVID, you had, I mean, I'm loosely defining it as race riots, but you had issues around race. You had, you have a highly volatile situation where people are really starting to take sides very far away from each other on vaccines, and there are all kinds of issues as an employer.
Financial stress, which is one of the biggest triggers in a home.
Yes.
So people's home lives was just so difficult.
Absolutely.
Too.
So,
Yeah.
you know what was very interesting about being a leader? You had to understand what you do in times of stress. And me, I take charge. I'm just going to tell you what you got to do. But I actually learned that I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
That yes, it worked for maybe the first month, right, for us to get through it, for me to utilize my experience. But then you're talking about the next 2 years. It was about connecting with the team. How are you doing?
Yeah.
I really need to understand how you're doing. I need you to trust me enough. I have your back. Let's figure this out. Because it was wave after wave of unknown, dealing with the next crisis. And you almost like, you know, if somebody's taken care of someone who's been really sick, you get into this like, you're so highly alert and highly focused.
Yeah.
The minute that happened, I had people on my team starting to get sick. I had people that hadn't seen a doctor in 2 years that are suddenly going back to the doctor. And as someone who cares about their team, you really have to sit back and say, okay, I need to encourage that because I've put in the work to understand what's important to them. I understand what's going on in their home life. And even though we all have a job to do, you know, if you have a small team of like 5 people, one person might need something really a lot more help this week because they have something going on personally. How does the rest of your team and you as a leader kind of pitch in and make sure that you've shaped that kind of a culture where it's okay when someone's having a bad day, it's okay when someone's having a rough week or even a rough year? I use the example in our session. I had someone on my team that ended up having a very traumatic early delivery of a baby. How our company worked with her was amazing, the things we were able to support, but it was how the team rallied when she came back to say, you're dealing with a very medically fragile child who her weekends might be spent in a hospital. How do you rally around that?
Yeah.
And so whether it was COVID or that, I really came out of COVID as a leader starting to say, how do I have the team I want that does that? Yeah. I know some people have put this on LinkedIn, you know, manager, don't tell me my team is a family. But at the heart of it, whether you call it family or not, I want a team that blends together and looks out for each other.
Sure. And I think just to that last thing that you said, there is a way to apply the correct blend of, we are a business, we do have jobs to do, we do have to make sure this company makes money and we're doing our part to support the business aspects. But anyone who says that like culture and relationships and team relationships and dynamics and leadership doesn't directly affect how well you can do those functions and those roles, you know, they would be wrong. So that's where this concept of this leadership comes in, is are we making sure we are blending our priorities correctly and making sure we have that strong culture.
The thing that was interesting is once we all went remote for COVID, right, there wasn't the turnover. You knew your team. You had been in the office with them. You knew what they were made out of because you heard those casual conversations in the office, and you knew a little bit, right? Yeah. You could overhear the panicked call of a child from home saying, I'm sick, and understanding when someone left. When it went then and we had some of that turnover of companies, people maybe paycheck chasing a little bit. Obviously, the wages went up for a good deal of us. But what you saw once that turnover happened is how do you build that team now, because you didn't have that base relationship.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that supply chain is challenged with right now, especially around leaders with remote or hybrid teams, my team's all over the country, how do you bring them together to build that trust when you're not in the office?
Wow. Yeah.
So, there's great tools out there, Microsoft Teams, Google Chat, all these different tools, but as a leader, you have to figure out how to bring your team together and connect them, and not just a team meeting to talk about the business. How do you just, have a casual conversation? How do you just get to know them? My team started, it wasn't me, so I can't take credit. Someone on my team started Photo Friday. So we each send a photo from the week. It could literally be anything from our cell phone about or a trip we went on or something that was, important to us, and you talk about it. And so you're really starting to get to know people of, wow, you chose that photo out of everything that happened this week. Tell me about it. I want to understand and learn about you. And so we've had to do some of that to really start to get the relationships to be deepened.
Awesome. Well, Laura, thank you so much for talking about this. This was a very fun surprise for me. I haven't had this type of conversation in a while, so I love the perspective and the topic that was covered here. I do have to ask, is this your first time attending the JOC Inland Conference?
It is. It's the first time. I was supposed to be a speaker last year, but I had something come up personally that I had to cancel last minute. But first time, very impressed with it, actually.
Yeah. What's been your favorite part so far?
I really feel like the niche here is for shippers that have truckload intermodal.
Yeah.
For me personally, I'm a smaller shipper, so most of that is on my inbound raw materials and inbound into my DC network. The information has really been invaluable around theft, around security, around bidding, all kinds of different topics as a shipper. I was really surprised at how much the content felt very, very relevant. So I'm excited to bring some of my team that focuses more on my inbound freight and have them come here and learn and get some ideas.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for making this podcast part of your time here at the conference.
Of course, anytime.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm here with Rachel. Rachel, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. So, Rachel Acker. I am with Wolverine Worldwide. I'm the Senior Director of Global Logistics.
Awesome. Well, I am very excited to hear from you. I know you just finished speaking, I think, this morning, right?
Correct.
Okay. And what was your panel topic about?
So, my topic was on container rail theft.
Okay. I have not heard from anyone yet on the theft side, so I would love to hear your kind of like what got brought up in this conversation, what were some of the questions, and what were some of your main takeaways from this conversation?
So I think the big thing for me is awareness, and also, sharing perspective as shippers. We had the rail line on, we had, we had the police aspect of it. You just have the various parties that can come together, and it's really highlighting that it is an issue in the U.S. It's a threat to customers. Yeah. It impacts businesses. So what you can do, what are best practices, and really how to approach it.
Yeah. So I don't know, how long have you been in supply chain? Let's put it that way.
In supply chain, about 14 years, I believe.
Okay.
In my current business, about 26 years.
Okay. So what have you seen change in the last, let's say, 5 years when we're talking about theft, rail theft? Because I have been increasingly hearing more and more about cargo theft. I've been in the industry 6 years, so is it dramatically different than it was before, prior to 6 years ago? Or are we just with, media and everything talking about it more?
I mean, It has been there for a while, so I think it is awareness. I do think social media through the pandemic. There was a lot of news coverage, Southern California. I think everybody saw like pictures, news articles of rail cars just completely broken into.
Yeah.
So I think that helped highlight what's going on, and it's really just, it seems to be one of those topics that people are a little bit more comfortable to talk about. And I think technology, as it's advanced, has also maybe changed the landscape a little bit.
Okay.
Not to say that it's not also like a crime of convenience.
Sure. So I am interested from a technology standpoint when I think about like cargo theft on rail. I'm imagining no matter what type of sensor you have on there that says what's going on would not deter theft, right? Or am I wrong in that? So what is like how are we trying to work collaboratively to actually prevent theft? Or is there a way to do that? Is it more just about it's going to exist, so like how do we manage it?
I think it depends on which camp you sit in, honestly, and I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution for shippers, your commodity. So I think it's, you have to look at what can you do, what's the cost to do that versus the cost or risk associated with not taking action.
Sure.
I think there's certain things that you can do from, protecting your data to different processes to make sure you're doing everything that nobody wants to touch your stuff because they know it's not as easy to get into or something's going to get alerted really quickly. There's locks, there's different things that different customers will deploy. So to me, it all comes back to each individual shipper, each individual customer. What's your level of risk versus cost investment?
Yeah.
But then there's also the angle of how do we, as an industry, not individual customers, come together to hopefully see better ways of preventing this. And right now it's kind of a little bit of a free-for-all.
Yeah. Well, I can't keep you long because I know you're on a time limit, but I loved hearing your insights. I hope that anyone who wasn't able to make it to your session this year is interested in attending to hear topics like this next year. Was this your first time attending JOC Inland?
No, it is not.
Okay. So what do you look forward to each year about this conference?
For this conference, it's really about the content. So, one of the big things for me is I get the agenda or I'm talking to one of the JOC team members and it's, okay, what do they maybe want me to speak about? Or what is the content down here that I want to come listen to?
Yeah.
They tend to do a really good job of getting content that is relevant to what is going on in the industry.
Absolutely. I could not agree with that more. It's been, especially this week, which happens to coincide with a very big event on the East Coast. And so it's like a perfect place if you want good coverage on that, right? To be.
Absolutely. There's a lot of good sources around here.
Well, thank you so much for making this podcast a part of your time at the conference.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm here with Inga. Inga, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure, sounds good. My name is Inga Holmes, and I'm the Senior Director of Logistics and Trade Compliance for the Fossil Group.
Okay, and the Fossil Group, watches come to mind? Yes. What else?
Jewelry.
Okay.
Leathers, bags, belts, wallets.
Okay.
All of your accessories.
All of the accessories,
including Fossil brands, but also other Fossil owned brands like
Okay.
Scoggin, Diesel, Michelle, Emporio Armani. All of those other brands we also serve.
Okay, and you had a couple of panels that you were involved in, but you were involved in the what's called a think tank, I think, right? Mm-hmm. And it was for the Dallas area.
Yeah.
So first of all, for anyone who's like, what's a think tank at a conference, can you kind of tell us what that was all about and who was there, who was participating?
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for people that are impacted by that particular area to come together in more of a closed-door session where it's almost like you can say whatever you don't want to, and we all agree that it stays in that room. And that allows a lot of transparency within the audience. And so you really get a lot of good conversation.
Yeah.
We had some shippers, some dray providers, steamship line. We had BN and UP there. And it was very healthy conversation.
Good. And so what were some of the topics of discussion for this session?
Well, as you can imagine, everybody wants to talk about ILA at first.
Right.
And we did a little fun game there where we had everyone write the number of strike days that they estimated on the back of their business card. And the person at the end of it who got the number correctly wins a lovely fossil gift.
Oh,
so
that
we
is very
had a little fun.
Yeah.
So we'll see who's the winner of that little game that we played. But it is interesting. A lot of people guessed from 9 to 11 days, which was that's interesting. So people expect this thing to go on a little bit long.
Yeah.
And then certainly talking about some of the contingency plans that some of the providers, how they will respond once the gates do reopen.
Sure.
And how they will reposition equipment and capabilities into that market to serve that, rush of cargo once everything does resume once again.
Yeah. And so now in the Dallas think tank, are you guys predominantly affected by the Port of Houston?
Yeah.
Is that where a lot of this business is flowing through when it's leaving and coming into the inland rails in Dallas?
Yeah. So when we talked about Dallas, we also talked about Houston.
Yeah.
And the market there, and certainly it's the Port of Houston that is impacted by the ILA. But the flows coming into that market come from both the Gulf Coast and the West Coast.
Okay.
So you've got cargo coming in, and arguably there's some East Coast cargo that comes in from the Far East sometimes through the East Coast as well into the Dallas market. So it's sort of a triangle effect in that market, and there's different rail services, a lot of trucking impacted by it, and it's an interesting triangulatory area.
If we didn't have an ILA strike right now happening, what do you think would have been, or maybe was still brought up as talking points when we're talking about the Dallas area?
So the surge through the West Coast recently has been, I think, a topic of everyone that has seen that impact of the increased volume, which impacts the Dallas area because, of course, then there's, let's say, delays in the West Coast getting that inland rail to Dallas. So that would have still been a talking point, and was.
Yeah.
So we all know that that's happening too. But beyond the ILA topic, we also talked about the smoke signals that people use to detect when there are problems. And it was interesting, we took a poll and asked if people are using external versus internal data, and most of them were using internal information versus external information to say, hey, Houston, we've got a problem. And then we also talked about in the Dallas market, there's been a consolidation of dray providers. And, just sort of pulling the audience to say, hey, did you know about that? And that is something that's happening in the market. People didn't seem to be, let's say, have great concerns about it. Some seem to be aware of it. But these are some of the things that are happening in that market.
Awesome. Well, what are some, I guess, maybe lessons or takeaways or experiences that you think are notable having been involved in operating in transportation in the Dallas market over the last several years? I don't know how long you've been working there exactly, but I know that the conditions now were much different from how they were during the pandemic, after the recovery, and then also in the lower markets that we've been having. So maybe really what I want to know is, how do you feel like things have been, and do you foresee any challenges coming up for this retail peak season or into 25?
Yeah, so the Dallas market, by many estimates, could rival Chicago one day, and is expected to grow at that speed. You see it in the warehouse builds. You see it in the volume coming through the rail systems, the trucking systems, et cetera. So I think the market sees that growth rate and will continue to, and they're going to continue to build out their capabilities to support that. I mean, it's not a bad problem to have, right? So it makes it to where you just need to, let's say, build the church a little bigger for the next Easter Sunday.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights. I have one last question for you. Is this your first time attending the JOC Inland Distribution Conference?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, it is.
And I'm impressed. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's the content of these sessions is more, let's say, frank conversation style. Versus a lot of death by PowerPoint, and I think you get a lot deeper in those topics that I've seen at other conferences sometimes.
Yeah.
So I have enjoyed it. I hope to come back again.
Awesome. I think frank also equals productive,
Yes.
right? When we're
Yes.
able to just talk very honestly
Yes.
about it, we can get to solutions and ideas a lot faster. So I
Totally
appreciate
agree.
that about this conference. Well, I also appreciate you making this podcast part of your time here. So thank you for coming on.
No worries. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you guys want to be part of the Journal of Commerce Inland Distribution Conference in 2025, I highly recommend you follow S&P Global on LinkedIn. You can find and connect with Eric Johnson, Ari Ash, or William Cassidy on LinkedIn as well, and you will be sure to see all of their updates around next year's conference. Or you can also follow the Meet Me for Coffee podcast, where we always promote and help to cover the show.